Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Darcinovia here. How are you guys doing? This is the stream that you people have been wanting, and this is the podcast. I know you people have wanted for over a year on Mandalorian. Unfortunately, I was not able to deliver. But with this podcast, since I'm the solo host, I can deliver on things that I promise. Now, Mandalorian. There will be spoilers in this podcast. If you have not fully caught up with Mandalorian, I would suggest you leave after I talk about season 2. If you don't give a shit about spoilers and you just want to hear my thoughts anyway, well, you're welcome to. But don't say I didn't warn you. I don't want to hear complain that I spoiled something for you because, I talk about spoilers that have been known for almost a month now. Now, Mandalorian. Just to get over, the history a little bit before I get to the meat of this video. Mandalorian, what was announced in 2018 and was going to be announced as the first live-action Star Wars show. At the time, I was skeptical because, if I have to be real, I have not liked anything Disney has put out for that much. I don't think that's a secret. I've not liked any of the new movies, and I felt Mandalorian would be more of the same. That's, how I, looked at Mandalorian at the time. Now, when Mandalorian aired, on Disney Plus, I watched the first 4 episodes and I dropped it. Why? Mandalorian just didn't have my interest. And after the 4th episode, I saw Rise of Skywalker, and that pretty much killed any interest I had in Mandalorian. And not to mention, at the time, I was watching my favorite Star Trek series, Deep Space Nine. I was like in season 5, and things were getting really good. And I was like, why am I watching this when I could watch this? And I just ignored Mandalorian completely. And that's why it took me a year to watch the first season, because I just lost interest very quickly. If I had to be real, I had to force myself to watch this show. I didn't really have an interest in watching it, but considering my viewers wanted me to do a podcast on it, I decided, you know what? I'll give them what they want. So, yeah, Mandalorian, the show itself, what do I think? I think Mandalorian, is overrated. But then again, I'm going to talk about the second season later. I'm just going by the first season. When it first came out, people were praising Mandalorian like it's the second coming of Christ. And honestly, I thought the praise was insane. Because, okay, Mandalorian is not a bad show, but holy crap. It's not the best thing since sliced bread. But then again, things were so bad for Star Wars when Mandalorian came out that people were desperate. Anything. As long as it wasn't as bad as the sequel trilogy. Then again, I would go as far as to say that Mandalorian was probably the first, decent live-action Star Wars that we've got since Revenge of the Sith. Because everything before Mandalorian, to me, was just garbage. Honestly. The sequel trilogy being completely forgettable. Or it was probably the first. The spin-offs being forgettable. It wasn't, enjoyable for me. And that's the problem, I have with Mandalorian, at least. But it's not a bad show compared to other stuff that exists out there. Though I do wish people would stop acting like this is the savior of Star Wars when it clearly is not. But hey, if it saved Star Wars for you, all power to you. All power to the people that generally want to enjoy Star Wars. And, has not enjoyed it because, everything that came out in this era has not delivered So I can sympathize why you would love this show. I can sympathize why you would consider Mandalorian the best thing to have come out of Disney Star Wars. And to be honest, it actually is. If we're going by the live action department, the set design, this applies for both seasons, is really good. The soundtrack feels like Star Wars. The costume design is top notch. Everything about this show feels like you're watching a Star Wars movie. And I could understand why someone would enjoy this show, honestly. And not to mention exploring a different aspect of the Star Wars galaxy. Now, season 1 of Mandalorian, since I'm going to talk about that, isn't a bad start for a series, honestly. They did kind of play it safe for the first season of Mandalorian. But honestly, considering how everything, turned out in the sequel trilogy, it kind of had to happen. Because, they had to essentially, play it safe for a bit before they do something new. But I don't think this first season completely went safe because they did actually do stuff that they would not have done before. But then again, they had to. The positives I will say for season 1. The first episode I felt was a great introduction to the series. There was not that much dialogue, but it told us everything we needed to know about the character, the Mandalorian, our protagonist. It told us everything we needed to know about the world of Star Wars. In fact, Mandalorian, more than any show, that was made in the Star Wars universe, I feel like, feels the most like the original Star Wars trilogy. And that's not a bad thing, because the original Star Wars trilogy, if there's anything it excelled at, was, storytelling that actually told that stuff through the visuals. And that's what Mandalorian did for the first episode. Episode 2, would do the same thing. Episode 3, things would actually shit really starts to hit the fan. And the premise of the first season is the Mandalorian running away, from bounty hunters because he basically stole Baby Yoda, who would later be known as Grogu, but whatever, that's a spoiler. Sorry for spoiling that, but whatever. I assume you've already watched it. Mandalorian, season 1, towards the end of it, I do feel like it was a great, season overall. For the first season anyway. I mean, I don't think it's the greatest Star Wars thing that's ever come out, but considering everything that's come out before this, it's freaking God. Now, Mandalorian, season 2, my feelings are mixed on this season. Now, I know this is, might ruffle up some feathers, but I felt season 2 of Mandalorian, most of it felt like filler, and most of the episodes did not need to exist. You could have condensed, some of the episodes, and we probably would have had a better season. It feels like Dave Filoni, and I know I'm not the only one that feels this way, and I know me and B-Level are the minority. I am content with being the minority. For me, Mandalorian season 2, it felt like the only reason for this season to exist was a backdoor pilot for other shows. And that's really sad because, it felt like it basically undermined what the first season set up. And it didn't, rather than, take the show to new heights, it basically felt like filler. Barely anything happened in season 2. You had a stupid episode which involved the stupid thing with the eggs, which a lot of people complained about. Oh my God, Baby Yoda did this. It's like, yeah, that was a dumb episode. It was freaking cringe. I don't understand why they did that episode. I'm convinced that episode was basically a backdoor pilot, for, New Republic Rangers. Then you had, the third episode, which introduces Bo-Katan, For those who are fans of Clone Wars and Rebels, you're familiar with her. I don't think her introduction was bad. I think her introduction, was great. Here's the problem. She was not introduced organically. She was only introduced so Mandalorian would introduce Ahsoka. And that's the problem, because if anybody knows anything about Dave Filoni, he's basically an Ahsoka fanboy. He's a fanboy of Ahsoka over any of the other creations in Star Wars. And as a result, Mandalorian Season 2 suffered for it. Because you had multiple episodes that revolved around the Mandalorian fighting the Jedi in order to give Grogu to a Jedi so they could train him. But the episode that introduces Ahsoka, it also feels like filler. No, it isn't filler. It feels like filler. And the only reason for that episode to exist is to introduce a live-action Ahsoka. Now, I'm just going to state what I think of the episode itself. I thought it was good. I felt, Ahsoka's transition from cartoon to live action was done brilliantly. And it showed that with Bo-Katan, that you can take characters that were introduced in the cartoons and have, them translated in live action. Now, for the other characters in Rebels, like, Ezra, you're going to probably need a different actor, possibly, considering he's like no longer a teenager at this point in the timeline. It showed it can be done. And the Ahsoka episode, if you're looking at it on its own, it's not a bad episode. But if you are a Mandalorian fan and you don't care about this stuff, well, for me, I felt this episode, again, felt like another filler episode. That I felt like you could have done the same thing with Luke Skywalker, which I'll get to that later. Now, the episode after that introduces us to Boba Fett, which this in itself wasn't a bad episode. But again, the only reason for this episode to exist in the first place was for Baby Yoda to get captured, and we'd have to have another filler episode before we get to the finale. Now, this episode itself, introduces us to Boba Fett, and I know many fans for many years have wanted Boba Fett to actually come back in Star Wars in a live-action format, get, the actor who played Jango Fett and Attack of the Clones to play him, and I think he did a great job with Boba Fett. Even though I do think his, that scene when he killed all the stormtroopers is kind of cringe, in my opinion. I can understand why some people would enjoy that. Then again, this episode was basically a Boba Fett fanboy's dream come true. The next episode, which I think is my favorite episode of the season, which reintroduces us to, one of the characters that was introduced in the first season, the former Imperial guy. And one thing about this episode I really do like is we get a glimpse of this guy's past, of who he was. And you know what? If there's one thing I can say about Mandalorian that's positive, that any of the new characters that are introduced in the show are interesting. With the exception of Grogu, who's nothing more than just a prop. They're interesting. This guy, I want more of him. I want more of his story. I'm curious about his past. Who was he? Now, that is an episode I like. Is episode 7 filler? Kind of, but I like the episode. I really enjoyed that character. And it showed how far the Mandalorian's willing to go to save Grogu, even if it means violating the rules of his Mando clan by taking off his mask. This episode was really good. The finale of season 2, though, it was a decent episode. I mean, I did enjoy the appearance of Luke Skywalker, but if I have to be honest, when people think about this episode, many years from now, they're not going to think about, how emotional the goodbye between, the Mandalorian and Grogu was. No, people are going to think of Luke fucking Skywalker. That scene where you saw Luke Skywalker and you had this epic music playing. People are going to think of that scene when they think of Mandalorian Season 2, the finale. They're not going to think of the emotional scene, with Yoda. Why? Because Luke Skywalker is who the hell, cares about these other characters when you have, Luke Skywalker? I'm being honest here. Luke Skywalker, is a scene that anybody can be excited for, especially if they were disappointed with how Luke was in The Last Jedi or simply loves Luke Skywalker in general. That's the scene I feel like stands out the most out of this episode, because everything else out of this episode, is not something that's worth really talking about by comparison. Yeah, there was some big plot development regarding the Darksaber, and there was, potential good setup for season 3. But the thing about, season 2 of Mandalorian, it feels like almost the finale of the show. You could end the show here and not much would change for it. Season 2 of Mandalorian, in my opinion, I feel like really suffers from Dave Filoni and Disney wanting to set up future shows, and rather than do it organically, like Marvel does when they set up new movies, they basically inject a bunch of stuff that the season did not need. I feel like season 2 would have been better if it just set up one show. If it set up the Ahsoka show and it did it in a way where it doesn't feel forced into the story. And speaking of which, when the whole point of season 2 is for the Mandalorian to give Grogu to a Jedi that will train him, I do not understand why nobody in this time period would tell him about Luke goddamn Skywalker. It's not like he's not one of the most famous people in the galaxy at this point. It's not like he's not like the most well-known Jedi in this period. And why doesn't Ahsoka tell him about Anakin? Not Anakin, Luke. It's ridiculous. It's really ridiculous, honestly. That's the thing that's ridiculous about the second season of Mandalorian. Honestly. Luke Skywalker, there's no way the galaxy does not know who Luke Skywalker is. I mean, even by the time you get to the sequel trilogy, people, Luke Skywalker is famous throughout the galaxy. You're telling me he isn't famous at this point in the timeline? It doesn't make any sense to me. Why would people, not actually know who Luke Skywalker is? You tell me Bo-Katan has never heard of Luke Skywalker? Come on. Or Ahsoka? That's the problem with this season. It feels like you could have made the season shorter if you had the Mandalorian seek out Luke Skywalker instead of doing this stuff that he's been doing, throughout the season. That's the problem with Mandalorian as a whole, honestly. The series doesn't even try, at least in the second season, to actually have a coherent plot. Because season 3, what are we going to go from here? Yeah, you do have an interesting storyline with the Mando set up, in the Bo-Katan episode. But let's be honest here, most people watch season 2 primarily for the Grogu stuff. With Grogu gone, even though I do think Grogu being gone from the show is an improvement, honestly, it will be. I hope season 3, does something interesting, because with the Darksaber, we potentially have, a good storyline for season 3 and 4. And that's one positive I could say for season 2. Getting rid of Grogu this early, gives them the opportunity to focus on the more interesting parts. Because I do believe the Mandalorian was set up to be the next Mandalore in, the first season. And the second season just reinforces this. Because his defining character trait is not taking off his helmet. You want to know a defining trait of Mandalore? Not taking off his helmet. Or her, whatever. You know what I mean. Season 2 of Mandalorian, is not bad per se, but I feel like it would have been so much better, if it did not, feel like a back door for all of these future spinoff shows. Because let's be real, the Boba Fett's appearance, Ahsoka's appearance, and Luke Skywalker in Bo-Katan overshadow the Mandalorian completely. Especially if you've been, acquainted with Star Wars canon, for as long as you have, and you've been watching the Clone Wars, watching Rebels, and are a fan of the original trilogy as well. When you see these characters on screen, and with the Mandalorians, like, who cares about the Mando? I want to know who these characters are. I just feel like it was not a good move on their part to do that. At least not that much in one season. The best of these appearances was by far, that felt the most organic, was Boba Fett. Boba Fett, since he's a Mandalorian, and I feel like, and same thing with Bo-Katan, I feel like theirs felt the best, like they were the most organic to me. But again, I feel like Bo-Katan could have been cut from Mandalorian season 2 and not much would have changed, in my opinion, considering her only purpose was to introduce Ahsoka to the series. Now, Mandalorian season 2, it's not as good as the first season, and it's not a popular opinion to have, but I'm going to die on this hill. I thought the first season, was much better than the second season. It felt like it had more of a focus. There was only like one filler episode in season 1. And that filler episode was my favorite of the season, ironically. Season 1 felt like the main narrative was keeping Grogu safe, and it stayed to that premise throughout the entire season. Season 2 was about getting Grogu to a Jedi. Yet we had a bunch of side missions throughout the season. So Mandalorian season 2, it's not terrible, but it's not the, what it should have been. Hopefully season 3 of Mandalorian, since all these backdoors of different shows, are out of the way now, we could finally focus on what I care about in Mandalorian. I want to see more of this guy's story. I want to see more of the side characters that were introduced in Mandalorian. I think they're all interesting. I really want the show to focus on those characters. Even though I could see Bo-Katan playing a big role in season 3 and 4 of Mandalorian, I want it to focus on the Mandalorians at this point because, there's a lot of interesting stuff it's set up. And with the main villain, basically gone at the end of the season, where are they going to go from here? Well, there's plenty of Mandos. We could have a Mando antagonist, that could go on for a few seasons. And who knows? We'll probably get remnants of Death Watch that will appear, in season 3 and 4. I don't know. I think the possibilities are endless, but here's the thing. Season 2 was just kind of a disappointment. Season 3, I do feel like is going to be better. Now, my thoughts on the post-credit scene with Boba Fett. Well, I thought it was kind of cool. It was, the Jabba's palace being recreated and seeing it in modern day effects, and seeing Boba Fett sit on the throne was a pretty nice shot. The book of Boba Fett, the potential in that, who knows? I'm not a Boba Fett fan, but I'm going to keep my eye on this one. Mandalorian, as a whole, I don't think it's the best Star Wars thing in the world. I think it's overrated. But I think Mandalorian, in my opinion, it's okay. It's all right. For me, I think people should stop sucking its dick so much, and people should just relax, take a chill pill. It's not the best thing that's ever been released in Star Wars. It's not the worst either. Mandalorian, as a whole so far, is just okay. Hopefully, the Mandalorian fanboys don't lose their mind because I said the show was okay, but it is. It's okay. It's not bad. It's not good either. It's just okay. May the Force be with you, and see you guys next time with another podcast. Next time, I'll be talking about Light of the Jedi. Later.